So I've been looking into getting a double clutch Rubicon now for a few weeks, getting prices and stuff, and I thought I'd share with you guys my reasoning behind it. So with the Rubicon I have now, these are the ratios right here. These are all the different reductions I've run: 15%, 27%, 35%, 47%. Those are all different combinations of primary and secondary reductions. And the bike is the most fun on 31s with a 27%, with a final drive ratio in first gear of about 67. However, you need at least a 47% reduction if you're going to run 33.5-inch BKTs or 32.5-inch Mambas. And I like to change tires so much, which is not a hard thing to do, but changing gear reductions is a lot of work. This requires me to pull the front cover off the motor to go from a 35 to 15 right here. So that's pretty unsat. Here you'll see the double clutch Rubicons gear ratios broken down by all the different reductions in the bike. And here's the one I have now, the IRS Footshift. There's obviously more numbers here because it has high and low range, so you add that row that this one doesn't have. Engine turns, so the engine's going to turn 56.55 turns for one revolution of the tire in low range. So a higher number here means a lower gear ratio. So you can see that stock, the double clutch Rubicon, is a little lower than the IRS Footshift Rubicon. If you look over here, you'll actually see that it's 7.4% lower. So it does come with a little bit of gear reduction in low range. However, the double clutch has closer gear splits. Starting with this, I'm putting a 39% reduction in. Obviously, I'm going to do a gear reduction. So those are all the numbers, and I wrote a formula that goes in here, and based on the numbers, selects numbers that are similar within a certain range. So we can see that a double clutch Rubicon with the 39% reduction has the same first gear, essentially, as my Rubicon had with a 47% reduction, which is awesome. That's low corresponds to first gear at the 47, and then first gear high and second gear low correspond to a stock first gear on a Ruby, which we know is a pretty decent gear for, ripping around with like a 30. Ratios are crucial with the Honda though, because you want to maximize the use of the small amount of power you have. So you want to make sure that you're in your max power range at the max speed. You can actually spin those tires in the mud to get enough wheel speed to clean out. So having 10 forward gears gives me a lot of different options to get the most out of spinning those tires and getting the tread to clean out. If you look here, you'll see that the difference between high and low range is 44% about. And so yeah, that's a pretty big difference. You go from high to low. So if you plot it on a graph, low range is stupid low. However, if you plot high range versus the gear ratios I have now with a 27%, this red line being my 27% and this yellow line being what I would have with a 39% in high range on the double clutch, you can see that second, third, fourth, and fifth gear are pretty close to each other. First gear is a little taller. This is perfect for trail riding because right now on 30s or 31s, I usually start off in second gear. So with first gear being a little taller, I'll be able to actually start off in first gear, and my shift points will be about the same for trail riding. And the bike trail rides great right now at the 27. So I really do think this is going to be a killer setup. You'll have high range for trail riding, and low range if you want to bolt on some massive rubber. It's also interesting to note that the 47%, I had a range of ratios from 77 to 15. I still have 78 to 15. So I'm only getting a slightly wider range of ratios by going with a double clutch. So you would think, oh, why are you doing it? It doesn't make any sense. That's because you're considering all 10 gears here, which you're not going to be, accelerating on a trail, shifting between high and low. You're going to be either in low and mud, and you're going to be in high most of the time. So that's why I made this chart over here, because in high range, it will behave almost exactly like it does now. But overall, I will have the same spread of gear ratios as a 47%. I'll just have the option to go in between that more, which will make the bike a lot more rideable without having to change gear reductions every time I change tires. The only option at this point is a double clutch Rubicon, which I might be buying this weekend. I'm really hoping Honda comes out with a 1000, which would probably have high and low range, which would also fulfill my needs. But it's not looking good, so this is probably what I'm going to go with for my next build and get rid of the Can-Am. And I'm just going to say this before all the Can-Am guys do. It's not like, you can get a Can-Am and be like, oh, it already has high and low, it'll spin any tire or whatever. The tuning of a CVT is so sensitive to the weights in the springs, I've been learning. you can't, if you go up an inch of tire size, you've got to re-dyno your CVT and, pull off the belt housing, take apart the clutch, whatever clutch you have, and change the weights or even change the primary spring. So this is a problem across all the bikes. So it's not like I could really do this with a belt drive either. Not to mention my Can-Am can't clear more than 29.5s without ripping out its own headlights, and I'm still smoking belts on 29.5s, so I would never consider bolting up the 33.3s. Yeah, so before they start saying, oh, you should just get a Can-Am so you have enough power to turn whatever tire you want, you still have the exact same problems with tuning, because a CVT, if anything, is more picky than a 5-speed manual transmission about having the exact right gear ratio to get the most out of the bike.